Good morning, everybody. I am Heidi, and you are watching Heidi Creates. I'm having to do my intro to the video outside this morning because I have my grandkids visiting me. And although I do have competition with the wind chimes behind me, so hopefully it's not too loud for you and you can still hear me okay over the wind chimes. I do find them kind of soothing. Anyway, just to let you know, the giveaway is over. I have notified the winner of our giveaway, and congratulations to you, Rachel. Today we are going to be working on an art quilt. First of all, I'm going to kind of show you a little progression of where I've come from in quilt making. And I've done blanket quilts, and I've done quite a few of them, but I don't do them as much as I do the art quilts. I really do love doing the art quilts. It's really fun for me. I do like to use the Derwent Inktense blocks for painting on my fabric. And when I first got my Inktense blocks, this is a piece that I did early on when I first got my blocks. And it was just white fabric, white cotton fabric, and I painted on it and then activated the colors and then did stitching. And you can see the black around the flower, the leaves, and then up really close, you should be able to see the meandering stitch all around the actual image part. You can be as simple or as complex as you want when it comes to doing the art quilts and painting. Now, the stitching on that one was fairly simple. This one I did last year for our boat, and we wanted something that was, you know, ocean themed. And this one was painted with the Derwent Inktense blocks, and then I did thread stitching. And I'm going to bring this up really close so that you can see all the stitching that is there on this bird. Now, the Derwent acts as a background color so that, you know, if you don't get your thread completely filled in, it's okay because you have the painting behind it. But the thread is wonderful because it adds a very interesting texture. And eventually I will do a video with you on how I do this. I did put a sleeve in this, and it goes all the way across, and I can stick a piece of wood in there so that I can hang this up with that. But on the boat, we don't have any straight walls. So I needed a different way of hanging these because they would just flap on the bottom free from the wall. So these little Velcro thingies that I sewed on the back, and that's how they attach to the wall on the boat. That's just kind of giving you an idea of different ways that you can do the art quilts. Today's art quilt, since it's fall, and one of the things I love about fall is I love the sunflowers. I thought we would do a simple sunflower design and make it small. And this one's just been painted, and it hasn't been sewn yet. And this one we're going to do much like I did that first quilt I showed you, where we're pretty much doing outline sewing, a little detailing in the petals of the flowers and in the leaves. It's going to be a two-part video. I don't like to take my videos any longer than 30 minutes or so. And so this one's going to be about how I paint it and how I do that. And then next week we will do the finishing work. We'll do the stitching and the finishing up of the quilt, how I bind it, and how I do the sleeve on the back for hanging it. If you haven't done it already, subscribe and hit the little bell button. That's going to let you know every time I put a new video out, and that way you'll be sure to catch all of them and won't miss anything. If you give me a thumbs up too, that's a great help. And I'd love to hear your comments. If you have any questions, need a little bit more detail that I somehow missed or didn't quite give you enough information, I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. Got down to 34 degrees last night, so it's chilly outside. It's a beautiful day, blue sky and all of that, but it's chilly. So I'm going to hurry up here, finish up. So we'll see you on the other side. I put a link on my website for this particular download. Now, if your printer, like mine, does not print the image as far out to the edges as some of these points go, it's really simple just to draw that in. Just make a little point on that leaf, and then there's a couple little flowers, is barely a tip missing, but just, you know, right on the paper, you can finish it out. I'm going to be doing this on top of muslin, but I think I'm going to go ahead and do it off to that side, because if I want to put a saying or any kind of writing over here, I got the space to do that. So how do I transfer this onto the fabric? Well, there's a couple of ways that you can do that. Number one, and this is how I did it for years, was just take your image using some masking tape, go paint it, or excuse me, go and tape it onto your window and then lay the fabric over the top of it, and I tape it on as well. And then you can take your, if you have a friction pen, pencil, one thing about the friction pens is that you can erase the lines afterwards by using your iron, or you can use some of like a water soluble type pen, however you want to do it. Most likely whatever we're going to do next is going to cover up those lines, so if you did a pencil very lightly, it would be fine. I have now a Huion light box, or a light pad as they call it, and I got this off of Amazon, and it's the Huion model L4S. So I'm going to put my image on the pad first. You can use masking tape on this. So just to ensure that my image does not move around, I'm going to tape it onto the pad. But I'm leaving a good inch and a quarter on these two edges, the bottom and the left edge, just to be sure I have enough for sewing and trimming off the selvage edge. And that'll hold the fabric, that'll keep the fabric from moving. So using my pen that is removed by using the iron, applying heat with the iron, I'm just tracing my lines. And I'll go ahead and do that for all of this, and then we'll come back. Here is the image traced onto the fabric. I wanted to show you that before I put away my light box. And you know, one of the things is I used a perfect circle in the center when I drew out the pattern, but by all means, don't be restricted to the image on the paper, because in nature, it's not perfect circle. So try to make it as natural as you possibly can, and we'll be doing more of that when we do the painting on the fabric. The next step will be just setting up for painting. In preparation for painting it, I do put behind it a single layer of Warm and Natural, and that's what I've got here. In all my quilting art pieces, that's what I always use. It's needled cotton batting. It's organic, it's very absorbent, and for the painting, I like that absorbency. Just like my watercolor paintings, I like to tape down my my panel before I paint it, and so I press this down and kind of stretch out as much as I can, and then I tape on opposite sides from each other. And when I'm doing the second edge, I tend to put it on the fabric first and then give it a little tug. Hopefully you can see that. Give a little tug. I don't want to stretch it too much, but I want it taut anyway. And then just really press down on that really well so it holds good. And again, I'm going to press, here's a thread, that'll be okay. I'm going to press down first onto the fabric. And I do cut my batting the same size as my fabric piece. And the reason for that and not making it bigger or anything like that is because I need it out of the way for taping this down. And it's not terribly crucial that you know, pull out all the wrinkles. I like it taut, and that's just the watercolor artist in me doing that. And I don't know, I think it is very helpful in when your canvas is prepped correctly. I think it just makes the whole process easier in painting. And I like a stretch canvas for painting on. So I'm going to pull that just a little bit. You know, don't want to distort anything, that's for sure. All right. Now you'll notice my cutting mat is pretty warped. I've had to take this on several times to and from Wisconsin and Florida, and being in the car with the heat, it's kind of messed with it a little bit. So anyway, all right, so painting, let's do that next. When it comes to painting my fabric, I love using the Derwent Inktense blocks. Now this one is, I think it's the largest set they do, 72. I also have the 36, and they do have a 12-piece kit, which is plenty, especially when you're first starting out. You know, you don't want to make the big investment. Go for the smallest one, because you can make colors, you know, with the basic colors that you're given. These do have wells in them, so you can actually mix colors together. Now, do whatever you want to do. Have fun with your colors. I think for the center, I'm going to kind of stick with my more browns and red browns. I'm going to pick my light source for my picture to be the upper right-hand corner. You will think of a sunflower, the face of that sunflower, but kind of curves down and away on the outside edges out here. So we're going to have some bright areas, especially right here, because that's going to catch the sunlight first, and it's going to get darker out in here. So it's good to work with light, your light color first, and I'm just going to follow the shape of the flower. Okay, so that's going to be our light color, our sunlit color. Let me see. When it comes to doing this kind of thing, I love lots of color. This is a pretty dark color, and I'm taking that to this is the part of the flower that curves down into where the petals are. So it's typically darker right in here. And that's one of the things that I want to do too, is I want to eliminate that perfect circle in the center, because it's not a perfect circle. Now Inktense does have pencils as well, which I'm sure most of you already know that. And I haven't used them yet, not to say that I won't, but I love the Inktense blocks. They work so well for me. And I don't mind the larger shape. I can get more detail if I use a finer brush and then use a wet brush against the actual block, you know, and that will afford me some more finer detail. So this is a color that's got some red in it, and so I'm just kind of adding that in there just to intensify the depth of color here on the outside of the sunflower, giving it some more red. So I'm actually going to stop at this point for that part, and I'm going to jump down now to the leaves. The sun is up here in this corner. We're going to get a lot more light right up here along this edge, but because the leaf is curling down, it's going to become darker down in here in the front. So I think I'm going to use a fairly light green to begin with. And I'm going to try, if you looked at the picture that I gave you to download, if you're using that one, I did use veining marks so that you know which direction you want your strokes to go. So I'm kind of following that. The veining would be coming down in this kind of direction. So I'm doing my stroke lines that direction. Now, I'm going to go ahead and grab a yellow, and I'm going to just brighten up this area right in here where the sun will be hitting this. And you also have to remember there's going to be some shadowing from the stalk and the flower probably as well. So depends on how detailed you want to get with this. I'm going to make this part of this leaf pretty bright with yellow in here because that's going to get touched by the sun. We want to indicate it going deeper into this spot right here. And then we're going to bring some of our color, our darker color, down in the front. Right here, this back is curled up, but it's backlit by the sun. So we probably want to indicate a little, maybe a little light coming through there. So as it gets down towards the center of the leaf more, it will be darker. Where these leaves right here curl up, I do want to make those darker. It's kind of a blue-green color. And that's going to help differentiate between the curled up leaf and the inside of the leaf. I'm going to go ahead and use the same color right in that middle vein. Now, one of the things you don't have to worry about is because we're going to be doing some stitching, and I wouldn't call this, we're not going to do thread painting per se. We'll do a little bit of it, but I mean, and actually this is yours. You could take it as far as you want to, but we're going to be doing more, I guess, more quilting with our stitching, not as much. We'll do a lot of outlining and some vein indication, but not necessarily painting with our thread. Because I think what we'll go ahead and do is mostly just use black on here. Because that's being shadowed by the leaf, that dark's going to carry out just a little bit more. But I'm going to go ahead and indicate the stalk of this flower now, using this darker color here. And this is the side that it's shadowed on. But it's also being shadowed by the leaves. Or excuse me, by the petals of the flower. So we can indicate some shadow coming down from the flower. Go ahead and put in a lighter green right in here. I'm going to go ahead and bring in my yellow, and just right in here on the stalk, I'm going to give it a little touch of yellow right there. I'm going to do that too up here, just like as if the sun is just kind of shining through that leaf a little bit. I want to fill in more in here because I want to keep that dark. Really make sure that I'm indicating that this is darker because it's away from the sun. It's curling down away from our light source. There's so many varieties of sunflowers. You can make these flower petals as yellow or as orange and red, or even more of a burnt colors in there. It's kind of really your personal preference. I'm going to go ahead and put in some pretty bright yellows up in here to begin with, just because these are just, they're backlit quite a bit by the sun. They're on that side where the sun is. I want to come back with this really dark brown that we used along the edge, and I want to seep that out a little bit more into the base of the petals. You know, these sharp edges on the squares, as long as you've got one still, that's great for indicating lines, which we're going to be doing that with our thread, so it's not super imperative. I'm mostly doing this because I want the brown to fade into the lower portions of these flowers. So I'm not looking so much for making defined veinings or anything like that. One of the things that I like to do is use the opposite on the color wheel to create shadow. And what I'm talking about is I have these flower petals and they're yellow. And when I'm wanting to indicate shadow, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take a purple, because purple is, or a violet, whatever you want to call it, it's the opposite on the color wheel, and it's great for indicating shadow. So if my flowers in the back are being overlapped in the front, then this is a great way to shadow right there to indicate. And I'm just using this dark purple. And if you don't have that color, well, you can obviously make that color by using red and blue. And you can mix that. But one of the things I try to encourage people to do, and it's okay in some instances, but try not to use black, you know, for creating shadows, because it's really not black that's being created. There's other colors, you know, that's in there. So I'm going to go ahead and go through here and do more shadowing. I'm going to go ahead and come in with some different oranges just to add variance of color to these petals, you know, are in shadow more, and it just, you know, vibrance. Now, if you find yourself wanting, you know, to rest your hand and be more detailed with this, another great way of keeping yourself from, you know, marking up your fabric in other places where you don't want the color that's gotten on your hands is to lay down a piece of paper or something else that you can protect your surface with, just to keep your hand from making any messes on it. Now these up here, I'm putting more of the darker color closer in because that's the part that's going to be mostly in the shadow. It's not on a flat plane. So just try to think dimensionally. Especially over here. Now, it could be that these petals, you know, the tips are bending back away, so they're not getting as much sun because they're over here shaded a little bit more. But this might be, you know, the most highest point of the petal, so it could be getting more sun right there. So it's just kind of playing around, doing what you think, you know, how do you want to indicate the shapes of these petals? Doing how you think that these petals are dimensionally. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. I mean, we could go crazy with how detailed we want to be in the painting. Just remember, we're really going to make this thing pop when we do our stitching with the black thread. And do the next step, and that is activating our painting with water. From there, we can decide whether or not we want to add more color, and you can do it while the painting is wet. You can go ahead and do that step next, and then see where we're at with it and how we like it. Yes, wouldn't you know it that I cannot find my favorite paintbrush for when I'm doing the activation of the Inktense. This is the next best thing. Actually, what I use is a really short, square, scrubby brush. This has longer bristles than what I normally would use, but because this isn't really old one, this has got, it's pretty stiff back in here. I'm going to go ahead and use this, and it should work pretty good. I should be able to get in there and scrub pretty well. I got a couple of containers of water. So if you've never worked with the Inktense before, you can get a lot of bleeding, and typically I'm pretty okay with that. But if you're really trying to eliminate or avoid too much bleeding, then here's a couple things that I do to help with that. And number one is by having the cotton batting, the Warm and Natural, behind my fabric. That just really seems to work for me. It absorbs a lot of water, and it just doesn't bleed and spread quite as much. Also, just being sure that you wipe your brush off as you're wetting it, and you dip it in your water, you know, just kind of wipe your brush off on the rim of the glass a little bit so that it's not completely soaking wet. And then I typically start in the center area, and if I have a lot of room, you know, from here to out there is a long way, so I don't worry so much about the bleeding. And I just kind of work my way out. And that just helps with the bleeding aspect of this. Now you see I put a lot of water on that moment, but because I'm so far in the middle, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect what I'm doing outside so much, this area, because it doesn't bleed out that far. So anyway, that's just kind of how I do that. And let's go ahead and I still, you know, I like to kind of follow with my strokes the direction that the flower shape is. So I'm kind of, you know, keeping that circular motion here. All right, so I pretty well have that center activated. I do have a rag that I keep on hand just to wipe off, clean my brush if I need to. So I'm going to start with my flowers, and I'm going to be activating that tip up there. And this is where it'd be bleeding out. And again, I typically don't really care too much a lot of times if I get a little bleeding. I think it can kind of make it interesting. So if you want to keep more of the brighter yellow at the tip, then once you cross over into this darker color, don't go back up into the light yellow, because you will darken it. As you can see, I did right there, which is okay. Nothing's a mistake here, right? It's artistic expression. So I'm going to So now that I'm coming down in the darker area, I do like it when it bleeds, you know, or fades from dark to light. I like that. But if I'm wanting to really protect that brighter area up there, I'll start there and then not cross-contaminate it. That makes sense. But here we're showing up those shadows in there, which is pretty cool. I've concluded activating the colors in the actual flower part, and I think I'm happy with that. Go ahead and start working the stalk and leaves. You can do the dark areas, activate those without touching the light areas, and then clean your brush off and come in and then sweep the light areas into the dark, because once the dark's been activated, it doesn't move a whole lot, this particular type of medium. Just kind of watch as I'm doing this, and hopefully you'll just kind of pick up your own method and you know, see what I'm doing, and then from there, you know, pick up your own method, what works for you, play with it a little bit. Let's go ahead and get started with that. I did write some words here. It says stand tall and bloom, and still not sure if I'm going to actually have that on there, but I can, you know, get rid of that by just using the iron and erasing it. But what I'm doing right now is I'm using the Inktense block flat. It's full length, coming around the edges, and this is a, it just broke. I'm going to try this. I think of that. So I noticed some water, just the water bleeding into the flowers, and if I didn't wet these flowers and then, you know, make an even wetness, it actually would end up drying with that watermark. So that's why I ended up wetting this again. I'm just kind of fading out that watermark. And if you were watching me while I was doing this, one of the things I did was wet in the areas I want to pretty much stay white, and then allowed then the color from the outside to bleed into that, and then you get more of a nice fade to it. So this is the point where we just need to let everything dry, and we will go to the sewing step next.